bringing pride to Tough Mudder. The reason I want to do that is because they've done a good job of being very inclusive and stuff like that. And you mentioned it. I can remember a couple of emails going out and 2020-ish, maybe 2021, that were really about like, it's a Tough Mudder is an inclusive space, and they really wanted to fight like the expectations that people are placing on it, because I think a lot of people have their preconceived notions of like situations.
No whining.
No quitting.
Overcome.
No community. Teamwork.
Tough Mudder.
Tougher together. No excuses.
Hey, to all my Mudder family, OCR brothers and sisters, and to you listening to this podcast right now. You're my peeps also, because we do share a world together. And I am your mirror man and the host of Tough Mudder's podcast, No Excuses, Sean Corvelle. Diversity, inclusivism, support, and awareness is just some of what you will experience at a Tough Mudder event. It is identified in the company's brand and reflective of its community. In June, Tough Mudder raised the Pride flag alongside our national flag to celebrate Pride Month, and will fly the flag throughout the rest of this season as a symbol of support for the LGBTQ plus community. In coordination with Mudder's Ashley Russell and Carissa Joy Tile, a special Pride Start Wave was organized at our New England, Michigan, and Nashville events. In this episode of No Excuses, I talk with Ashley Russell. She has a deep passion for social justice and tells us how Tough Mudder UK's Pride Wave, created by Jack Poseidon O'Reilly, inspired her to team up with Tough Mudder North America to create a Pride celebration wave at our Nashville event to bring more awareness to the LGBTQ plus activism and culture. Along with being a 27-time Legionnaire and ambassador for the Tough Mudder brand, Ashley's Mudder family. And she opens up a little about her personal life when we talk about her coming out twice and how she identifies herself as queer. Our conversation for me reinforces the feeling that we share a world with people, a very diverse world. So we're not just talking Pride Month, we're talking Pride forever with Ashley Russell on No Excuses. I love you, Ashley Russell. How long have we actually known each other through Tough Mudder?
I did my first Tough Mudder in 2016.
Wow.
And so we would have met that year.
Yeah.
And 2017, I did 3 of them. And I think that year was really the year that I saw you a couple of times and you started recognizing me.
Yes. For our listeners who may not know what Tough Mudder is, it is an OCR, a obstacle course, we say racing, but we do have races, but for most part, it's you just come out there with your friends, by yourself, however you feel. And it's about building community, achieving goals by going over 20 some odd obstacles. And we have a 5K, we have a 10K, and we have a 15K, depending on which one you buy an entry for. And it's an awesome experience. People come out, they volunteer, people come out and support other people that are running. And like I said, the biggest thing I've gotten out of it is this tremendous community of people that have become friends and chosen relatives. And you're one of those people for me, Ashley. So I'm so happy to have you on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So how did that come to happen, that we coordinate with you for this special wave?
So there's actually a Pride Wave over in the UK. It's really been a big thing there. Jack, Jack, right?
Mm-hmm.
Red hair kind of. He's over there. He's been the one, from my understanding, that's did a lot with that. And in 2019, he was like, hey, we should do one in the US. And I was like, okay, cool. So really in 2019, we had our first one in Michigan. Sadly, I wasn't able to make it to that one. And then COVID happened. And so this year, I guess it was about March, I started asking TMHQ. I was like, hey, are we doing one this year? And they're like, we'd love it. And so that's how I'll be at Nashville. We have a couple other ones. There was one in New England, that was last weekend. There's going to be one next weekend in Michigan. And so those are both, Michigan will be Saturday, Nashville's going to be on Sunday of the event.
Now, when you guys decided to coordinate with Tough Mudder, Yours was the only one that we were thinking about doing over here in the States, I believe.
Yeah.
And then we, like you said, we had one, I guess you can say officially we had one in New England last weekend. Depending on depending on when you're listening to this podcast, I'm recording it last weekend. We were in New England, and that was with Carissa, who I didn't do my homework. I didn't get her last name. But if you go online, everybody, and look at our New England pictures, you'll see Carissa with her team during that specific wave. I hand her the mic, and she does a little talking about the whole Pride celebration. And my vision of it, because I knew that you were planning something before that, was, and I was saying to you, I guess I was over the top. I was thinking that everybody in the wave was going to be representing Pride, the Pride Month and that kind of thing, which, I wish could still happen. I'll push it big time, but we were saying that anything that you can bring attention to, we'll take, and hers was an awesome wave. And your vision of it is?
I have just grandiose visions of what it could be like. Because if you see the pictures from the UK wave, it's like 30 people deep and probably more than that. It's just in the US, we don't have that capacity to get that many people because we have so many events, which is great. Don't get me wrong. But the ability to get people, and also like locationally, it can be hard because when you think of like very open and affirming gay community areas, you think places like cities like Atlanta, which it was in April. Pride's not in April. It's hard to be like, hey, we're going to do our Pride wave in April. That'll be hard. But so we're trying for Nashville. Nashville has a pretty good community. And Michigan last year did okay. And there were a lot of people or not last year, 2019. There were a lot of people interested in it. And so I think as long as we're kind of getting the word out there and getting people to talk about it, that eventually the U.S. can be, 30, 40, 100 people deep in this wave.
Yes.
It just takes time to build it.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking when you were saying it. Okay, so let's start building it. And eventually we'll get to like they're doing it in Europe, and maybe even a more convenient location. When I heard you say Nashville has a good community there, a good gay community, LGBTQ too. Yeah. I think that's the latest. plus, I forgot the plus community there. Yeah. It's like, yes, more and more I'm seeing communities that are not even popping up, but they exist. And I'm here in Utah now. Even in Utah, we have this, there's a great community here. And you can see it. I can almost feel it because, one, I lived in LA for a while, right there near West Hollywood, strong community there. Yeah. Grew up in the Bay Area, was in San Francisco a lot, strong community there, so I can almost feel it before somebody officially points it out to me. And it always, again, in my opinion, it just feels great. Yeah, it just feels great to me. It just has that community feel. I'm all about that. For you, let's talk about your experience, get to know you personally. Where were you born, little Ashley? What was life like for little Ashley, and how did she get to where she is now?
So I was born in Arkansas. I grew up in a small town of less than 1,000 people. Stereotypical, my parents divorced. My mom had custody, was raised with her. We were close with the majority of the rest of my family. Both of my parents were married. I have 8 stepbrothers and sisters, and I have 2 half-sisters. And I went to college in Arkansas after my first year. I was like, I kind of want to see what else is out in the world. I moved to Atlanta because that was the world. And it was such a big drastic difference. I'll never forget, because you've been to Atlanta, so you'll understand this. I was driving into Atlanta. I printed out my directions on MapQuest. You're talking about 2007. And so I'm driving, and it had me go 20 to 75. Mm-hmm. And it was a Friday afternoon. And so you can imagine the parking lot I pulled into. And I was driving a 91 Chevy Blazer. And have you ever just been in your crap car and seen all the brand new cars that were shiny and pretty, and yours had like some rust spots, and you're like, oh, I don't belong here? That was me. And yeah, I've been here ever since. I love it here. I love it here. It's such an amazing place to live. I live in the city proper, so when people are like, oh, I live in Atlanta, but they actually don't, I actually do live in Atlanta. I just can't imagine living anywhere else right now. It's such a great, inclusive, it's different. Like, once you get outside of Atlanta, so you go too far out, you're like, this might not be safe. But Atlanta itself, I'm like, okay. And I think it's also a little bit, I can disillusion myself into like what I'm living in, because Atlanta is like a more safe space, more inclusive, accepting kind of area. But whenever you get outside of, like, go too far out, you're looking at like less inclusivity, less like safe spaces. And so it's interesting, but I've been here almost 15 years now, and it's really interesting to say that, because sometimes I'm like, no, it's not. And then it's like, oh yeah, it has been 15 years. It's 2022.
That's awesome. Tell me about your reason for bringing awareness to Pride Month and to gay, lesbian, and just more awareness about the community, I guess, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. So I think you know this about me, Sean. I did Motivation Monday with you a while ago. I guess it's been like 2 years now. Social justice issues. Talking about the College of Ashley Russell, it would be about just fighting for what's right. And so I kind of just like to stand up for stuff, and bringing Pride to Tough Mudder. The reason I want to do that is because they've done a good job of being very inclusive and stuff like that. And you mentioned it. I can remember a couple of emails going out, and 2020-ish, maybe 2021, that were really about like, it's Tough Mudder is an inclusive space, and they really wanted to fight like the expectations that people are placing on it, because I think a lot of people have their preconceived notions of like situations. And when you look at some people, there's the judgment that people make. And I know that at some point there were just comments made to other people that weren't very inclusive or accepting and stuff like that. And Tough Mudder was like, no, we're not doing that here. And I was like, this is cool and all, but how about actually really kind of expressing that in a more visual way? I remember seeing a post earlier this month, and it was like, Pride Month is happening because there's still people in the world that think that they're better off dead than being LGBTQIA+. There's still people that think, okay, there's still people just killing themselves. There's still people that would rather end their lives than live a life because that's what they're being told. And to me, Tough Mudders did such a great job of building a good community. I love Tough Mudder. I love the community. That's really probably one of the main reasons I stuck around for so long. Because not only did I like enjoy it, I mean, there's nothing to me that's quite like doing an event. That's quite like getting up on Everest and helping people. But it was also like, whenever I officially came out, I got messages, not just like comments on what my post, but like individual messages from people who were like, I love you, and I'm so grateful that we're friends. And they were people that I met through Tough Mudder. Some of the best support I ever got were through people that I wouldn't have known without this event.
You said when you officially came out. When did you officially came out? And before that, relate what life was like for you then.
So I came out twice. I came out to my family whenever I was in my early teens, and I lived, like I said, in a very small town, which could be read as a very not inclusive town, not supportive. And I was told, maybe it's just a phase. And I was like, okay. And so for a long time, I just didn't talk about it. Like, it was never I hid it. In my mind, I always knew that I was gay. And I prefer to call myself queer, but a lot of people are very uncomfortable with that.
I'm sorry, say that again. You prefer to call yourself?
I prefer to call myself queer, mm-hmm. And it's a lot of people aren't comfortable with that. I just don't care about the gender of my partner. Like, that's just me. I came out whenever I was 14, kind of just hid it for a long time, didn't really talk about it. And then probably in my mid-20s, I was like, I should really deal with this. I started therapy. again. And I was like, yeah, this is something that I know to really be open about. And so in 2000 and I guess it was like 2000, probably about the time I started doing Tough Mudders, 2017, give or take, I started telling more people. And it was maybe 2019. I posted it publicly on my Facebook, like, this is me. And just not sharing it, there was a little bit of sadness to it. And I think sadness is not like an active sadness. Like, everything was just kind of blue, like tinted. Mm-hmm. And after I came out, things just became more vibrant. Like, I felt like a weight off. And even as I was coming out to friends, like, it just kind of got lighter and lighter and lighter. And so, yeah, eventually it's just like, hey, this is me. And this is what it is. And it went, like, the relief I feel even today. Like, I don't care if anybody knows. Like, I'm like, yeah, okay. But it took a long time to get there. And that's just how it is sometimes.
Did your family know when you were young? Did anybody have an inkling? And how were they when they found out, when you came out to them?
I think my family knew. Nobody in my family really was like, oh yeah, I knew. I think it's because, like, I came out to a lot of family very early on. I mean, like I said, early teens. And there wasn't really like oh yeah, of course you are. At least not with my family. And I think because I just kind of didn't do anything with it for a very long time, my family was just like, oh, okay, it really was just a phase. In my adult years, there's certain family that I don't talk to anymore. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily think that that's only because of being queer. I think part of it is also, it has to do with just like how loud I am about other things that matter to me. Because to me, there's so much intersectionality in being gay and like feminism and just other social justice issues, that for you to be one part of this and not fighting for all parts of it, for me personally, just, you can't do one without the other. Mm-hmm. So fighting for gay rights is the same as fighting for civil rights and fighting for reproductive rights and all that stuff. Like, it all goes very much hand in hand across the board. And so I've had family members like block me on Facebook and people who just don't have anything to do with me anymore. And it could be an easy thing would be say, yeah, I know it's because I'm gay, but I also know it's because they don't agree with the things I say about other stuff. And it's been a very eye-opening 2 years because, well, really eye-opening 3-4 years, because I learned that I'm okay with people leaving me. Like, I don't need those people in my life. It's sad at the same time, because you're like, that's family, that's blood, and like, you just think that they're going to be around forever, and they're still there, but they're just not part of your life.
Yeah, I feel fortunate with my family, even my distant family, that a lot of these conversations, when I hear people, and it's not just gay people, or it could be for whatever reason, like you said, even political differences. Mm-hmm. I don't know anyone in my family going to cousins, second cousins, or anything like that would dismiss another part of the family for those reasons. Now, if you're a pain in the ass, that's how we love you. Here comes our pain in the ass, mm-hmm. If you pissed me off because of the last family get together we had, or maybe my, God forbid, a family member is abusing their spouse or something like that, which nobody agrees with, sure, I got a two towards you, but it's to hopefully change, help you, but I ain't abandoning you. Kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So I always feel very fortunate when I hear stories like that, and it blows me away. I feel like that's an insecurity in that person's love, that they need to look into. Also, when you said you identify yourself as queer, my thought in my head, because I used to do, in my stand-up, I used to do a joke on stage about people that have a problem with gays, lesbians, however, it's like you have a problem with how somebody is. It's almost like they look at it or they zero in to, they have a problem with how someone's having sex. It's like it's all about how they're having sex. Now, certainly, there's some religious aspect that comes into it for them and their judgment. Mm-hmm. And I used to say on stage, if you're going to do that to people, then you got to do that to everyone. So you got to be like, oh, look at that person. That person's a doggy style person. He's from the doggy style community. Be careful with that person, Oh, look at that 69er over there. Look at that, we can't trust them 69ers. You don't know which way they're going to go, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That used to be my joke. So, the point is like when you say, okay, I identify myself as queer, and it's like, but there's so many other things going on in your life, that you could label yourself as your identity. It's not just a liberal, maybe. I identify myself as liberal. Sister. I identify myself as a sister. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So it's odd that I get where it comes from and why it's there, but it's just I wish people could step back and really look at that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and like I get it too. I think that there's also like an aspect to it. So everyone likes a neat label for a box, right? And when you move, you label the box like kitchen items, then you put what's in it, right? And so for people are so determined to be like, okay, this is your box. What labels are we putting on it? For me personally, queer is such a great label because it's not one thing, because it's literally, it can be, there are people who call themselves queer who predominantly date women. There are people who call themselves queer that predominantly date men and all that stuff. It's almost an umbrella term for a lot of people, but not in the sense that you can call everybody that, in the sense that it's like, this is a comfortable label for me. I used to identify as bisexual as far as my sexuality goes, and it just never felt 100% right. And as other things became more important to me and having conversations with people, the label of queer for my sexuality became more and more comfortable. And it's ironic that you brought up like kind of the politic aspect of the politics, like I'm saying liberal and stuff like that. It's because a lot of people who use the term queer as a label for their sexuality always also have like certain kind of political takes on stuff. And it's more of a spectrum, not just about sexuality, but about life in general.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and let's not make any mistakes. There's diversity in the gay community. I mean, you got your conservatives are there too, which always blows me away. Yeah, like, but it's the same way that you look in the Black community, and a very delicate one that I want to approach in that people have reasons for their feelings. My bottom line for that is what makes them feel safe in life. That's what you're going to migrate to. And anything that supports whatever that is that you believe makes you feel safe in life, you ain't letting go of that. And if this is the guy or lady who comes closest to making me feel this safe, maybe I may not agree with them on one thing or these things over here, but right now they're the best thing representing the thing that makes me feel safe. So that's kind of like the way that I see it. And when I'm looking again at the beginning of what I said, when I'm like, why not? Yeah, there could be Black people that are conservatives, and there could be gay people that are conservatives, and there's Black people who were against interracial relationships.
Exactly. Oh yeah.
I remember seeing a thing with gay people that were, I don't know if I'd say people, it was only one person that I heard actually saying it, that was against interracial gay relationships. And I was like, you're kidding me, right? You're putting me on, there's a camera on me somewhere. Really? So gay racists? Why not?
I think that there's definitely a lot of like that stuff that is very interesting, because everybody has like how they were raised, the things they were taught growing up, and the perceptions that they have of other people and situations they've been in that can go through and make people how they are. Like, we are a product of everything that's ever happened to us, or everything we've ever seen or experienced. And so it's always interesting to think about how two people can grow up in the same household, be raised the same way, but come out very differently. And so it's very much like what's making, like you said, I never thought about that at political parties, who makes you feel safe sometimes. And that's an interesting, I really want to write that down, because that, to me, I never thought of it like that. I'm like, oh, you're going to support who is the most like you, who you believe the most like. But when you put it into terms of who makes you feel the most safe in your life, that's a different perspective that I've never thought of.
Yeah. And sort of like when I think of like pride celebrations or any kind of celebrations in this, this kind of thing, one of the benefits of being a part of a community, a diverse community, and this I felt even more since I've, been a part of this Mutter community, is that then you have someone that you have connected to, maybe even you said you love, you've a chosen family that can hold your hand and take you for a walk in this thing that you felt was weird, that you were afraid of and threatened by. But I love you, so take me there. What am I not getting? Show me what I'm afraid of. Is it really something I should be afraid of? Because you say you're that person. And that's the benefit, I think, of something like what we're looking to do, what we try to do as far as like celebrating pride and being all inclusive. Have you ever had a problem with someone, a gay person, when you use the word queer?
There are a lot of, personally me, no. I tend to hang out, and like my community is a younger community, more liberal, kind of leftist views, people who embrace the word queer on a normal aspect. A lot of older people in the LGBTQ community are the ones that are against it, because very much for a long time it has been a slur. And to a lot of people, not on the extent, obviously, that there are other slurs that are used out there. But it was not something that was said in a good, like in a, this is me kind of manner. And so there are older people who kind of frown at it. And that's just like discourse that I've seen online and heard from other people, like people that my mom know who are gay. They're like, yeah, it's a little bit weird that you use that term. And I was like, I'm okay with it. And I think that's also like indicative of the generation that is coming up. Generation Z is a totally different situation. Those kids are crazy in a very good kind of change the world way. But they are very much like the ones embracing, like taking back certain things, especially for the LGBTQ community.
Yeah, and again, when you say that, I try to relate it to being a black person, and it's like, like there are blacks out there that have no problem at all in saying niggas. A word that has become so offensive and carries such a bad history and hate and all that stuff that, we've identified as the N-word. We can only say the first letter of this thing, and I'm surprised queer didn't get to that yet. And I was like, you can only say, did she just say the Q word? Yeah. You're
going to have somebody who reviews it and it's like, she said the Q word. We don't like that.
Yeah. And that cracks me up. I remember I was watching Joe Rogan, and he got in trouble for saying nigger. And I kind of agree. I did agree with him on one perspective of it. I'm like, I don't like when people say the N-word to identify the word nigger or nigger. I'm like, let's hear it. Let's feel how awful and the history that it carries. Let's not hide it, with just the letter, the N-word. So go ahead and say it. I don't agree with people that use it, even black people that use it. I personally think that it's even more destructive when it comes from the black person. I think the word nigger with the A is more dangerous than because nigga is almost like a Trojan horse. What's up, my nigga? And that comes, you let it in. Yeah, but it carries that same damage and history that the word nigga has, So, so like the person, I guess, that would hear you say queer, they would be, I hope that they would be like that in that, if they had a problem with it, it's like, so what? Hear it. Let her say the word. Understand. Get to know what this person's feeling and why they use that word. So that you can sort of open yourself up to it, have another perspective of it. I would hope.
And I think also there's the way it's said. Like me saying I'm queer, that is very different than somebody saying just saying the word queer as in calling me that. And you're not going to call somebody you're not just going to say queer without other parts to it unless you're trying to insult someone. And some people, even if you add the A, she's a queer, like that can kind of be a little bit iffy. Mm-hmm. But even like what you were saying with the hard R, like that's very much that for a lot of people is like, that's where it's hard for the N-word particularly. Yeah. And so it's also how you're saying it. Me personally, never going to say the N-word. Mm-hmm. I don't even if I'm singing a song and even just the A, I'm just like, you're not going to catch me. Nobody's going to accidentally catch me saying a word that I have no right to say because and I also think that there's a difference between what has happened to Black people and what happened to the gay community. Like, there's a difference in that. There's a very big difference. And even though there's some similarities, and there are, because it's both minority groups that were treated very poorly, you can't even compare. You just can't. And so for me personally, I'm like, somebody says, oh, she's a queer. Okay. I would be like, it's not wrong. You're not wrong. You shouldn't say it. But it also depends on how it's said, who it comes from, and just the sentence structure. The N-word doesn't matter, particularly if it's coming from somebody who is not a Black person. Mm-hmm. The N-word is unacceptable in the way that I've been taught.
Yeah, and once again, that's just my own personal feelings. One, that that niggas is more damaging. Niggas more damaging than niggas. Coming from a Black person is, to me, again, it has that Trojan horse effect of letting all that history in. But that being said, I would never censor anyone from using it. I wouldn't edit anyone from using it. The music that's out there that kids are using, that's their art. It's expressing what they've seen, what they've lived through. It's expressing something in themselves. And then when you hear it, digging it or not digging it, it's going to express something in yourself. So I'm not one that's going to get on there and say, you can't say queer or you can't say nigger or something like that. Again, that's there's a moment that we all get to grow right there. Comparing oppressions, do gays have it worse than Blacks? Did Jews have it worse than Blacks? I've always said you can't compare that stuff. That's silly. It's very relative to the person. People's, and I mean this in everything in people's lives, whatever challenge you're going through is relative to to that person. Again, and I've thought about when your kids come home from school and Joey says I'm a stupid face. To them, that's the ceiling of their world. Their world's about to collapse. Yes. Joey said but we've lived more here. We've had a different experience in life. So we're like, oh, Joey, well, he'll come around, or, lead with your left. Right? No, don't lead with your left. But my point being is that I wouldn't personally look at anyone's oppression challenges that they're going through in life. To me, that's all relative, and it's not for me to judge. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
I and even going back to that, that's my personal opinion. Some people, would obviously feel differently. I'm sure that there are people out there that feel like they had it, like, historically. Other groups have had it worse. I think, like, we're all entitled to our opinion regarding stuff like that. But yeah.
But this gets back to then, so why are there, like, the parades for certain groups, for a certain community? And why do we have to have Black History Month? Why do we have to have Pride Month? You know, this gets all back to the person asking that question and these words like woke, which used to be, I think it used to be PC, you know, which both of them are just saying, you know, be considerate, you know, be aware of what's going on around you. I wouldn't identify myself. I don't know if, I guess they've made a community out of that too, the woke community and all that kind of stuff, you know, and if you say if you say a particular thing, you're in it, whether you know it or not, you know?
Yeah.
So when I see these, again, getting back to what we're saying, we would like to bring that pride wave to the Tough Mudder community, to the events. It's like, why? You know, on my side of it, I'm not pointing the finger and saying to anyone out there, oh, you did something wrong. You know, I'm trying to, again, include you into a lifestyle, into what you've identified as a community, into this is bottom line, a person, a human being like you, a soul. So let's all start there right here. You know, let's feel each other on that level right here, kind of thing. For you, explain it to me how you feel about those types of, like, again, the parades, the celebrations.
The parades and stuff like that. So I think the interesting thing for me is that I grew up in, like, historically, let's talk about a little bit Ashley history right now. The town I grew up in, we'll say it was 99%, we'll say maybe 97% white. There were a couple of families that were Hispanic and maybe one Black family. And so there was nothing there for other people. And so this is what I grew up in. I probably knew two people who were gay in some form. I never really had any representation, even on TV. Let's be honest, you're talking about let's say late 90s, early 2000s. There was one gay person on TV, Ellen. And I think there was also that Will and Grace show, but Ellen was pretty much it, right? And so there's no representation. There's nobody who's doing the thing that was like me. And I mean, even then, Ellen, I am not like Ellen, like, at all. Like, she's a very petite, kind of more butch looking person. That's not me. And so when you have, like, that's the only representation you have of like the community, that's why I think things like Pride are so important, because it's an opportunity for people to be in a group, in a community. And for somebody who may never see people like that, see that. I think for me and Tough Mudder, and why I really wanted to bring the Pride Wave here, is because there's a point where you just want to see somebody who is like you doing a thing. And not just doing it and being, like, kind of quiet about who they are, but doing it and being openly who they are, and not just being an outsider in that community, not just being somebody who's standing on the sidelines, just kind of there, and having it be somebody who's part of the community and embraced and in the community, like, really in there as not an integral part, but just, like, part of it. That's, I think, a big deal. And so when Jack approached me and was saying, hey, maybe getting the Pride Wave in the U.S. is a good idea, I'm like, I think it is, because there's also the point where you want to feel safe. And that's one of my big fears. Like, and I think it's a fear of anybody who's in any type of minority situation in general. But hate criming is real. I mean, the number of hate crimes that have happened to not just gay people, but like especially the trans community, the number of murdered trans people is just growing. And it's when that is still an issue, you can't just expect for gay people to be like, yeah, okay, I'll do this. Like, you can't just expect for them to show up without them knowing, is this safe? If something happens, if somebody calls me a slur, or if somebody like lets me fall on an obstacle in a very intentional manner, can I go and be like, this person did this, and know that there's going to be some type of repercussion, some type of conversation about it. And the other thing is, people see when you don't say something. So for me in particular, there's been conversations I've seen and like on people's threads, and there will be a homophobic comment made. And if it's somebody I consider a friend and I see them not say something, I'm like, you're not really a friend. You're not really a safe place for me. Because if you aren't willing to call out this person who very publicly said something, what is going to happen, like, if somebody does something to me in your presence? And so I think having the pride waves and having, even going back to on a global level, pride itself, it's really important because it's an opportunity for people to see people who are like them. Like, and so, especially because there's a historical value in it too. The Stonewall Riots, and that's like where a bunch of this comes from. I mean, you've probably seen the shirts that say the first Pride was a riot, and
I haven't actually, but that's interesting. Yeah.
Oh. So the first Pride was a riot.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's an opportunity to not be alone and see how a community accepts a person, like, and how that community embraces a person. Because I know that there are people who are part of the LGBTQ community in Tough Mudder, but aren't open about it because they don't know how safe it is for them.
Yes.
Me, on the other hand, I could leg press 900 pounds and could probably kick anybody's ass who comes at me. And just saying.
Lead with your left.
Literally
okay?
kick them.
Tell me about that. Educate me on that. The first Pride was a riot.
So the first Pride happened. It was a protest from the gay community because police raids kept on happening at gay bars. And so when this kept happening, they're like, we're going to stop. Or they're going to stop it. And so I want to say it was something like 3 days. Let me pull up facts. From June 28th to July 3rd. And so the riots happened, and it was really very much because it's like, y'all keep on coming after us, and this has to stop. And then it became Pride. And it was led, a lot of people talk about Marsha P. Johnson, who there's some observation that they were trans, but I think officially, like, the real story is a drag queen. So I think there's some observation. Marsha P. Johnson eventually died. I don't remember if she was killed or not. But yeah, so maybe condense that to where I'm not saying a lot. But I think that, and so that's where it starts, the Stonewall Riots in New York. And eventually it grew as a thing that kept happening. Atlanta has only had Pride, I want to say this, maybe last year was the 50th year, so Pride didn't become a more national thing until later on. But yeah, and I mean, realistically, like, there is a lot of police raids that happen at gay bars on a larger, more often level than places that aren't catering to the LGBTQ community.
So now, as you're saying this, I'm Googling when was the
hmm
first Pride celebration? And I see the Pride Parade, uh, June 27, 19, inaugurated June 27, 1970 in Chicago, June 28, 1970 in Los Angeles, New York City, and San Francisco. It's amazing to me how these things, again, who's the person that started organizing this? Do we know who that is? I guess we'd have to read more on that. And
Let's see. I'm a pretty quick reader.
okay, good. I'm an idiot, so a proud idiot, and that statement alone shows you how much of an idiot I am to be proud of it.
Okay, so it says that the first anniversary was an assembly on Christopher Street, which began being marches. It doesn't say exactly who. I'm on Wikipedia. It doesn't say exactly who led it. So it sounds like how things happen. A couple of people get together, they're like, we're doing it. And then it starts, very much like most things start with a small group, and then it grows and grows and grows, much like what we're hoping we see with the Pride Wave.
Exactly. So I'm going to put you down in Google as one of the first people to bring the Pride celebration to Pride Wave to the Tough Mudder events. This will go out all over in Google because I'm putting it on my
Google
iPad.
History, here you
are. You're so awesome, Ashley. Thank you for all this. I feel like, and this is just my opinion, I'll get your opinion after this. And let me start it off by saying, so tell me where you work again.
I work for a psychologist's office. I'm a business manager.
Okay. So what I love about that is this, to me, all gets back down to the basics of human behavior when we're talking, when we're bringing psychology as far as my understandings and what I've studied. Human beings basically are sort of like, they have their knowns, they have their unknowns. And in our survival code, unknowns are a threat. Even the smallest unknown goes into that area of, this could be a threat to your life. Knowns make us comfortable. Knowns we're familiar with, so we feel safe with knowns. And this is such a strong feeling, so embedded in us. This is Sean again. This is Sean and his idiot knowledge. So embedded in us that it's not a conscious or a cognitive decision that we make when we make these illogical decisions on how we deal with that threat. So racism's born. Judgment starts to exist. And what happens is when these unknowns, again, when you're able to get them into that known column, become familiar with it, it becomes a part of your soul, hopefully through love, through experience of someone that you care about, then you can move it out of that. That's, to me, is the best way to move it out of that threat column, that threat that's in our, that thing that's in our lives that's supposed to keep us alive, that whether we think about it or not, we react to, we use. So that's what this does. That's what the importance of these things are to me. Again, Pride celebrations, Black history, whatever you want to tag to it, women's rights, celebrating women's rights, celebrating everything, is that the idea is to make this unknown to those that feel threatened, that feel weirded by this. And we want to do that, once again, by having someone, a friendly person just hold your hand. Come on, walk with me over here to this thing. Come check it out with me, like that, So, and the last thing I'll say on it is I've said for a long time, judgment, anyone who's judging, to me, that is a caution light for you to say that there's fear there. We only judge when when we're afraid of something. And 99.9% of the time, that fear is something in ourselves that we're not addressing. So I hope that people, will look at that, hear that, and say, what, really? Let me think about that. The next time you judge anything, ask yourself, why would I fear that? What is that connecting to that I fear in life? Your thoughts. And if you had a university.
How would I, okay, so people hypersexualize homosexuality and lesbianism and all that stuff. It is very much like so many people can't just see love in that, they see sex, right? And so what you see a lot in how people view, and in particular, like bringing that back to common day, like current day events, just people like the Don't Say Gay bill, right? And it's because a lot of people can't take a woman loving woman relationship away from women having sex. And so to go through and have people see just people being gay in everyday events, like that's, I think, important. Kind of like what you're saying. It's getting people to see that people who are queer, who are LGBTQIA+, who are any kind of spectrum, they're just living a life, right? They're just living their life, and this is just one small, minute part of who they are. But the other thing is a lot of time those people have to make it such a big part of who they are because you have to go through and make sure that the people around you are okay with it. And so there are some people who like can be that kind of like guy, like what you're saying. Like that's what I hate to say it like this. That's what I'm doing. I am putting myself, in particular with the Pride Wave, in a very like could be potentially disastrous situation. Because like going back to Nashville, right? I'm going to Nashville. I'm about to be very openly like gay. About to be very openly gay. Gonna have the rainbow pants, gonna have the pride shirt, gonna be waving the flags, and at the end of the day, that's also makes me a target. But at the same time, I could go through and impact other people's view. And I'm okay with that. And it's probably a little bit dumb because things could really like happen. Hate crimes are a normal thing. Sadly, it happens a lot. But at the same time, one of the things I think about a lot, especially in doing Tough Mudder, something that came to mind a lot is a lot of people don't see people who look like me or who are like me doing certain things. Like, I'm plus size. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And the funny thing is I just had my idea. I was like, except for my butt, there's a butt there. But in the Tough Mudder community, there's not many people who are bigger. Particularly, there aren't many women who are bigger. Because you have big guys because that's an acceptable thing. But I hope that one day somebody will see me and be like, oh, she did it. I'm going to try. Like, because, and that's part of like me going through and being ready to be this open, like very, like, in your face gay. Because maybe it'll help somebody else realize, one, it's okay. Like, that community is not all horrible. But two, also, it can make a difference for somebody who is still waiting for their Ellen, right? Their person to look up to. They're like, oh, that person looks like me. That person is like me. And they are like this. And that's okay. They're doing this thing. They're living their life. And I think about that a lot. Because you never know who's watching. Like, you never know whose life you're changing without knowing it. You never know who, even though you haven't thought about somebody in 5-10 years, you never know the difference you made on their life because we don't ever talk about that. And so, I don't know if this answered your question.
Yeah.
But yeah. So that's like, sometimes people just need to see the people to have the moment of, oh, this isn't what I imagined. Because it's not like I'm going to go out there with my pride flags and all that stuff and just be like overtly sexual. Literally, I'm wearing some biker shorts and a t-shirt. Like, and so the only thing that it is I am going through and carrying the rainbow, and people are going to know. But they're also going to be like, okay, well, maybe it's not all like the stuff that they found on the internet. That's just sex.
Yeah.
And I think that's important. It's a positive representation of a community. Well, I hope it's a positive representation of a community. But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Good. This is like, again, one of those conversations that I could go on. One of those, like when you're hanging out with friends, you know, again, with people, you know,
yes.
And you guys are all, maybe even after a Tough Mudder, we're back at the house and just sitting around. And this is the conversation that I love to have with friends, you know, because you're taking my hand again and walking me to a place that I'm ignorant of, that I don't know as much as I would like to know about, you know. So, that's what you do. You're the perfect person to take someone's hand and walk them.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's true. I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. You know, that would be another flag. We'd have to. So, Ashley, this brings us to my two fun questions that I ask of all my guests. If you've seen the podcast before. One is that quote I'm sure you've heard a gazillion times, and it was passed down to us by a wonderful man. His name was Craig. I got to visit Craig in the hospital just before he passed away of cancer, and he told me when he was diagnosed, this was the quote that he adopted, the motto that he adopted. I adopted it, brought it back to Mother Nation, and you guys made it so popular. I say it all the time. All of a sudden it became a song by Darius Rucker. The quote, the question to you is, when was the last time you did something for the first time?
Right now, doing this podcast. This is the first time I've done a podcast.
Excellent.
On a okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else, but that's really it. I went skydiving a couple of years ago. And that's my other thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like I said, to anybody listening, you know, it doesn't have to be something that's like just crazy or out there. It could be the simplest thing as hugging a stranger. You know, maybe you watered your plant for the first time. You know, I got an orchid to live
or
past.
Plants.
Yeah, last a month. You know, my second question, fun question. Okay, so. You're out there, maybe you're even at a Tough Mudder. You're on the trail, come across a lamp, you pick it up, you do what everybody does when they find a lamp, you wipe it off. Out pops me, the genie in the lamp. Been in there for millions and trillions of centuries. So happy that you finally freed me that I am not going to give you 3 wishes. I'm going to give you the ultimate gift, Ashley. In this moment, I am going to give you the undivided attention of the world. In this moment, all of the world stops what they're doing and you have their ear. What do you say to the world in this moment?
I have to bring it back to what this podcast is really all about. And it's okay to be gay. And it undoubtedly gets better after a lot of bad times. It's going to get better. And yeah, just live your truth. Like, don't be afraid of who you are and embrace it and just live life.
Awesome. Yeah. Hopefully to you out there that are listening, you know, that you may be struggling right now with the whole sexuality thing, with the gay thing, you know, because of society, the pressure that you might feel. And we know where people go with this, the suicide count for our young gay humans out there. You know, it's like, you're awesome. It's not you. There are people out there you can talk to. There are places you can go. And there's a whole world and a whole life that's ready to open up to you, that you can share. So Ashley, again, thank you so much for this. I do love you again, and I look forward to seeing you at the Nashville event. Let's make this thing. Let's try and catch up with. What is this? Europe's got this on us, over us. No way. The gauntlet's thrown down now. That's a challenge. We got to build this.
I mean,
we have to build this.
We got to build it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I love you too. I wanted to say that. And I can't wait to see you in Nashville.
Yeah. You can find Tough Mudder on Facebook and Twitter. That will be @ToughMudder, or on Instagram, also @ToughMudder. Please remember you can find this podcast, No Excuses, on wherever you listen to podcasts. Guys, subscribe. Let me know what you like, what you're not liking, and I will be including you as much as possible and even more in the future.
Inspirational.
Be inspired.
Inspire.
No excuses.
Motivational.
Be motivated.
Motivate.
No excuses.
No whining.
No quitting. Overcome.
No excuses.
Community. Teamwork.
Tough Mudder.
Tougher together.
No excuses.